of the timeframe post-parental injury, who it seemed were harder to reach through formal support. Agencies, as service provision had since ended for the injured person. Families had opportunity to express an interest in participating in the study in a number of ways. Firstly, potentially eligible families were told about the research by recruiting localities and provided with a copy of the study leaflet, see Appendix B, study leaflet. They were then invited to make direct contact with, or have their details passed on to, the study team. Secondly, potential participants were given the opportunity to respond directly to advertisements displayed by recruiting localities in-house, online or within newsletters, see Appendix E, study advert. To protect participants' rights to privacy and confidentiality, recruiting localities were not informed which families ultimately consented to be interviewed. Thirdly, families already participating in the TBI Experiences study were contacted directly by myself, as a researcher working on that project. Thorough ethical and methodological consideration was given to this process and a formal 2. Whakapapa in Maori culture refers to genealogy. Whakapapa links people to their ancestors and all living things, and to the earth and the sky. Taunui, 2015. 49. Communication strategy was established, which included the development of a specific telephone script and follow-up letter that were approved by the principal investigators of the TBI Experiences Study and AUT Ethics Committee. Full details can be found in the recruitment proposal, which acknowledges and addresses the ethical and methodological considerations made in sourcing recruitment via this method. See Appendix D, Recruitment Proposal, which includes the telephone script and letter. Potential participants were screened for eligibility. If meeting inclusion criteria, the family whānau were sent further information about the study in the form of a parent participant information sheet, see Appendix E, Participant Information Sheet for Parents, and a child information sheet, see Appendix F, Participant Information Sheet for Children. The child information sheet, alongside other material prepared for the study, was designed to be as accessible and engaging for potential child participants as possible, respecting their rights as autonomous, active agents capable of making informed decisions about their lives. To support this design process, exemplar documents were sourced through consultation with other childhood and disability researchers, and the literature was reviewed for guidance, see for example Alderson, 2005. A useful guidance document from a Young Persons Advisory Group, Medicines for Children Research Network, ND. Emphasized the design of participant information sheets that consider the presentation of material, including use of color, pictures and layout, alongside clear, concise content. To support the creation of shared understandings of language within the research process, the information sheet provided basic definitions of the concepts of research and TBI, alongside the more specific information about the study. The information sheet also provided a space for children to write down any questions about the study, with the intention of empowering them to engage in the research process and take an active role in choosing whether to participate. Some examples are provided below on p.50. If after reading the information families were interested in being involved, an initial meeting was set up with children and their parents to go over study information before scheduling an interview. Consent and assent processes. The initial meeting offered children and parents the chance to meet with me, as the researcher, directly and to ask any questions about the research face-to-face. The study was designed to allow sufficient time for information about the research process to be clearly explained to parents and children, in a way that was responsive to the individual needs of the different family whānau members. Both parental consent and children's assent to participate was sought. Most children raised their own questions during the initial meeting, and some had used the space on their information sheet to note down their queries. Their questions related to practical aspects of the interview, such as "Do I have to draw?" as well as inquiries about the overall intended impact of the study, such as, "How is this going to benefit other children?" See further examples in Figure 1 below. Children's questions demonstrated their competency to act as informed participants within research, showing reflection and insight on the process. Figure 1 – Examples of questions children asked about the study. 51. Parents provide their consent for their children's involvement in the research, but ultimately children's views held decisional weight also. The decision to take part therefore needed to be shared by both the parent and the child, and this message was clearly reinforced through the information sheets and in the process of talking about the study. Parents were required to give their consent for their children to participate, and children were asked to give their assent if they were happy to be involved. See Appendix G, Consent Form, and Appendix H, Assent Form. For those families recruited through the TBI Experiences study, parents were also asked if they would provide consent for data to be shared between the two studies for potential secondary analysis in the future. Consent and assent was considered an ongoing process within the research where, as the researcher, I was responsible for watching for cues that children were happy to be involved in. Comfortable during the interview process. Alderson, 2005. The underlying assumptions outlined above T.43, relating to children's positioning within the study, were made as transparent as possible to families considering participating in the research. Children and their parents were advised that the study was interested in children's perspectives of their experiences, which included their thoughts, opinions and ideas, and it was explained that there were no right or wrong answers within the research interview. The interviews were designed as guided conversations, Van Manen, 1990, and children were informed that they were in charge of what was discussed, allowing them to address the salient points of their experience of living in the context of parental TBI. As such, children could choose not to answer any question during the interview, as well as raise any issue they felt important. Both children and parents were informed that they had the right to withdraw from the study at any time, without having to provide a reason. Data collection. Collecting meaningful data through qualitative research interviews with children was recognized to be a collaborative process that relied on engagement with the family, whānau, as a whole. A child's position within a family, whānau, is the context that shapes their experiences. Therefore, the existing relationships, power dynamics and loyalties inherent within interdependent family, whānau life needed 52 to be acknowledged. Teachman and Gibson, 2013. The early consultation work undertaken emphasized the importance of establishing positive research relationships, and this was incorporated into the design of the study, which prioritized the need to create working relationships with the child and also the parent. Irwin and Johnson, 2005. The initial meeting with the family, whānau as a whole, was included as the first step in establishing trust and rapport with children and their parents, talking together to ensure transparency. The openness of the conversation was intended to allow children to see that their parents were happy to talk with me, as the researcher, and also, by extension, that their parents were happy for them to talk to me. This was deemed important in supporting children to feel comfortable discussing issues relating to family, whānau life with an outsider, especially in a context where children are often encouraged to be wary of strangers. Morrow, 2005. This idea was explicitly discussed through the process of talking about children's rights and their control of the interview conversation and parental consent, child assent, as outlined above. Parents were forthcoming in supporting this process, reinforcing to their children that they should feel free to be open and honest about their experience and explaining that they should not worry that what they say may upset or offend their parents. Ellis suggests that in seeking to make sense of another's experience, one uses everything they know to inform interpretation. Ellis, 2006, p. 115. As researchers cannot necessarily have access to the day-to-day social worlds of participants, she suggests that pre-interview meetings can therefore be useful in developing a backdrop that can be used to inform interpretation of children's accounts of their experiences. Within the study, the initial meeting was used to gather valuable, contextual information in relation to the child, their family, whānau, and their shared experiences of the injury, as well as the collection of basic demographic information, such as age, family, whānau makeup, severity of parental injury and ongoing impairment. The session also proved to be a useful opportunity for parents to share their own stories, discussing the impact of the injury on themselves and family, whānau life. This was helpful in that, as well as providing contextual information to inform the research interview, it also gave parents the opportunity to be heard, enabling the return visit to focus solely on children's narratives. The initial meeting also helped to establish the child's capabilities and 53 preferences to enable the interview to be tailored to their interests and needs. The contextual information shared within this session, and the interviews, was recorded as field notes and used as orientation within the interview and data analysis, prompting questions to explore in more detail in order to help make sense of children's accounts. As the researcher, I was responsible for supporting the participant to remain orientated to the topic during the guided interview conversation, working collaboratively to construct shared understandings of experience. Van Manen, 1990. Accordingly, a strict interview schedule, with set questions, was avoided within the study, and instead a customizable interview guide was developed that could be tailored according to the child's needs, taking account of their age, stage and interests, and responsive to the ideas they raised. The guide consisted of a pre-interview, warm-up activity, alongside a series of potential prompts and activities that could be used to support the conversation between researcher and participant. This approach was aligned with research that advocates for a toolkit of interview techniques that the researcher can draw on in relation to the participant within the interview. Teachman and Gibson, 2013. To support the construction of their narratives, children were given the option of using drawing as a form of expression in addition to written and spoken word in order to share their experiences. Drawing was recognized to offer children a constructive process by which they could craft and make sense of their experience in conversation with the researcher. Drawing involves more than simply forming images, it is equated with the capacity to think and feel. Young children's drawings open a window into their realities and how they shape these. As Cox, 2005, 124, notes, the constructive process of drawing helps children to purposefully bring shape and order to their experience, and in so doing, their drawing activity is actively defining reality, rather than passively reflecting a given reality. Through drawing and talking, children come to not only know reality, they create it. Wright, 2011, p. 159. Rather than regarding the final artifact as a source of interpretation, the focus was the research conversation that occurred through the act of drawing and telling. Carter and Ford, 2013, Horstman, Aldous, Richardson, and Gibson, 2008, Teachman and 54. Gibson, 2013. The process of drawing served as a tool for communication within the research interview in order to support the aim of finding shared meanings of language. Ellis, 2006. Not all children chose to participate in arts-based methods. And other techniques discussed below were used to support children to elaborate, in their own words, on their narratives in order to ensure interpretation remained grounded within the child's perspective and their lived experience. Issues of power were considered at all times within the interview to support the research conversation. Interviews took place within a location of the child's choosing in the home. They were invited to select who they would like to be present during the conversation and were told they had free access to the research equipment, including art materials and the audio recorder. 2. Warm-up to the idea of sharing stories, a game of talking cards. Australian Catholic University, ND. Was played in which a series of question cards were laid face down in front of the researcher and participant, with each person taking turns to select a card at random to ask each other. The cards contained sentence starters that needed to be completed, with examples such as, if I could have any superpower I'd choose, the person who makes me laugh the most is. The game acted as an icebreaker and chance to build rapport and provided further contextual information about the child, giving indications of their communication style as well as preferences, values and interests. The game also gave participants the chance to act as the interviewer and increase their comfort in answering questions, showing they were in control of the answers, including elaboration, they provided on topics raised within the collaborative interview process. As stated, the interview format was not structured around a fixed set of questions. Instead, a basic framework for the interview was developed using Van Manen's writing on lifeworlds as a source of reflection. Van Manen, 1990. The idea that the temporal dimensions of past, present and future constitute the horizons of a person's temporal landscape proved a useful concept to give shape to the interview structure. Van Manen, 1990, p. 104. Open questions were devised as starting points to consider the topic, broadly focusing on what life was like before parental TBI, at the time of the injury, since the injury and currently, looking to the future, see examples provided below. Alongside this, a range of possible prompts and activities were considered. This toolkit of potential interview techniques 55 included the use of draw and tell activities and poster design, generation of word salads, and thinking about children's top tips and wish lists. Australian Catholic University, N.D. Carter and Ford, 2013, Horstman et al., 2008, Teachman and Gibson, 2013. So, as an example, the series of questions used in one interview started broadly by asking, "Can you tell me what your dad's been like since he had his injury?" The participant explained her dad had been a bit angry and to prompt her to elaborate on this discussion, follow-up, open questions were offered, which included, "And what does he do when he's a bit angry?" And "What do you do when he gets angry?" When generating questions or prompts, I was mindful of trying to use the participants' own words when seeking further elaboration or explanation to avoid, as far as possible, preempting interpretations of their meanings. Within interviews, children often made their preferences for activities clear, for example in this case telling me it would be easier to tell you than draw about her experiences. Prior to the interview, information gathered within the initial meeting was used to consider potential questions that may be appropriate for the child and their context. These evolved through the warm-up activities and interview itself in response to the topics raised by the child, as illustrated in the example above. Interviews aim to begin with open questions to give children the opportunity to freely narrate, followed by more directed questions, where required, to elicit more information. Doherty and Sandalowski, 1999. Questions were intentionally aimed at exploring positive aspects of their experiences as well as negative. Morrow, 2005. Some children responded well to open questions and prompts, such as, "Tell me more about," or "What happened next," while others needed more direction, gradually building their narratives by answering a series of closed questions on a topic or story they raised. The word salad activity, where children would write down or describe whatever words came to mind when thinking about a selected topic, such as the time since their parent's injury, proved especially useful as a starting point to conversation within several interviews. Some children were also keen to use drawing to support their narratives. The interview process involved remaining sensitive to the accounts discussed. Children were given opportunity to redirect conversation if they seemed keen to move on, but also offered reassurance and prompts where appropriate to expand further on topics 56 raised. On the whole, interview conversations came to natural conclusions, and after being asked if there was anything else they wished to talk about in relation to their parents' injury, children were invited to turn off the recorder. On 2 occasions, the debriefing conversation after the interview prompted additional ideas, so the recorder was turned back on to document the discussion. Data analysis. The process of making sense of children's experiences began with the initial meeting with the child and their family, whānau. Contextualizing the child and their family, whānau, and learning about their shared experiences and motivations to participate in the research was important to support the collection of data for the purposes of analysis. The concurrent processes of data collection and analysis followed a pattern of movement indicative of the hermeneutic circle, Van Manen. 1990, with movement between the part and whole. The process involved considering specific experiences of the child's story and then broad ideas across their account, alongside exploration of the unique aspects of each participant's story in relation to all the participants' accounts. Meanings of the participants' experiences were also reflected upon in relation to the context of the life worlds of children more broadly. After the first family, whānau consented, each subsequent family meeting and interview was situated in the context of the ongoing interpretation of the previous participant's story. The observations and reflections made within and immediately after research meetings and interviews were recorded as field notes and incorporated into the material used for analysis. As discussed earlier, the act of transcription was recognized to be a process of representation, constructing an account of the experiences shared within the interview conversation. Riesman, 1993. Effort. was made to transcribe not only the spoken word, but also an indication of the intent of the speaker in the context of the conversation to ensure this was apparent on the written page used for analysis. The transcribed interviews were constructed into analysis material by combining the verbal stories with photographs of the visual representations created, artwork or written words, alongside the field notes that served as the contextual backdrop for the child's account. Transcripts were then read and re-read, reflected upon and discussed 57. With the supervisory team to become acquainted with the stories shared and deliberate upon interpretations made. The art of writing and rewriting was a core part of this process. Van Manen, 1990, p. 32. The initial reflections and ideas were recorded as analysis memos, which were incorporated into early writing on the study findings, which served to support additional data collection and analysis and the rewriting of early ideas in the context of subsequent reflection and interpretation. The study aimed to construct a thematic account of children's experiences in the context of parental TBI based upon the stories participants shared. Rather than assuming such information could offer generalizations across the entirety of the experience, the themes generated were intended to offer aspects of the phenomenon that may be used to guide fuller understanding of the experience. Themes are the stars that make up the universes of meaning we live through. By the light of these themes we can navigate and explore such universes. Van Manen, 1990, p. 90. Essential to the construction of these themes was the need to keep the perspective of the child, and their lived experiences, central. The analytical reading of the participants' accounts was guided by Van Manen's writing on explorations into children's lifeworlds. Van Manen, 1990. Each transcript was read as a whole for salient points and then re-read with reflection on the lifeworld existentials of lived space, spatiality, lived body, corporeality, lived time, temporality, and lived human relation, relationality. The reading was concerned with reflecting on the child's stories in relation to their lived experiences of space, body, time and relation with others and how this could support the overall understanding and interpretation of their experience as a whole. Once again, the pattern of movement between part and whole was demonstrated as key ideas relating to each existential were highlighted for each participant and written out and used as a tool to reflect on their story as a whole. The hermeneutic circle was further reflected as these ideas were drawn together to read across all the children's transcripts, comparing and contrasting ideas relating to the existentials between each of the participants. The existentials offered a lens through which to focus on different aspects of the child's lived world. Overlap of ideas was deemed inevitable as the existentials can 58. Differentiated but not separated. Van Manen, 1990, p. 105. Looking for these points of convergence, as well as the differences within and between participants enabled the thematic structure of the findings to be constructed. Ethics. As introduced earlier in the chapter, T.43, respect for children guided all ethical and methodological decision-making within the study. The study received ethical approval from the Auckland University of Technology Ethics Committee, see Appendix I, ethical approval. Consultation processes. The potential vulnerabilities of children and family, whānau involved in the study were considered alongside their rights and needs as study participants. The study aimed to work in meaningful ways with children and families, and as the researcher I drew on a wide range of literature, my own experience, the expertise of the study supervisory team and consultation work to guide this process. Recognizing that Maori are overrepresented in TBI statistics, Feigen et al., 2013, the study drew on the guidelines from Te Ara Tika, the Puteora Writing Group, 2010, to inform ethical decision-making in relation to supporting Maori, both as intended participants for the study and in terms of potential outcomes from the study. Prior to ethical approval, consultation was sought with Maori through the Kawa Wakaruruhau Committee to ensure safe cultural practice of the research. The committee offered opportunity for constructive critique of the proposed study designed to support Maori participation, as well as gain general feedback on the research. Additional consultation work was undertaken with a child and adolescent psychiatrist and researchers with specific expertise researching children and families experiencing health issues or family whānau violence. The consultation processes supported areas of the study where specific knowledge was required, including consideration of engagement with children and families in research, development of appropriate research materials, and management of potential safety issues. 59. Privacy, confidentiality and safety. The ethical principles of privacy and confidentiality were discussed with children and their families at the time of acquiring consent, assent. With respect for privacy, children were invited to choose where the interview should take place and the level of privacy they would like in discussing their ideas. McNaughton and Smith, 2005. Their permission was sought for the researcher to record the interview conversation. To ensure confidentiality, children were allocated an identification (ID) number used in place of their name, and all personal information collected, including names, contact information, was stored in a separate location, away from study data. This process was explained to children and they were shown their ID number and invited to select a pseudonym that could be used in study reports. Confidentiality, and its limits, was discussed with the child and parents together to ensure a transparent process. It was important that parents were fully informed that their child's narratives would be treated confidentially and the specific details of their stories would not be shared with anyone outside of the study team, including them as parents, unless any concerns were raised. Cuskelly, 2005. Equally, it was important that children were clear about the limits of confidentiality that could be assured to them in talking to me as a researcher. It was stressed that they should feel free to discuss anything they wanted, but to do so with understanding of the responsibility I would have if they raised any issues that were of concern either in relation to them personally or others. I explained that if I was concerned about any issues they raised, then it may be necessary for me to raise these with other adults who may be able to offer support. Children were told that, wherever possible, this would be discussed with them first, giving them the opportunity to have the discussion themselves. To support this process, a clear, safeguarding children protocol was developed in accordance with guidance from the consultations processes and literature related to child protection and research ethics with children, child, youth and family, N.D. David, Tonkin, Powell, and Anderson, 2005. A core part of this protocol was the researcher responsibility for transparent communication with children and their families, as well as the opportunity for debriefing and supervisory support after meetings with 60 participants. A copy of Safeguarding Protocol is included within the overarching safety protocols developed for the study. See Appendix J, Safety Protocols. Talking about experiences of parental TBI was recognized to be a sensitive topic that could elicit emotional reactions from children, and indeed children and parents did, at times, become distressed during conversations. During the course of the interviews, effort was made to provide reassurance to their responses and follow their cues when deciding whether to offer support in continuing, or moving on from, the conversation. Children were given the opportunity to debrief after the interview, to talk about how they found the process and to think about their own well-being. To aid this process, children were given a copy of the Support Information booklet designed for the study. See Appendix K, Support Information booklet, which contained a resource list which included details of free, confidential telephone counseling services for children. Parents were also given a copy of this information booklet for their reference. Data ownership. The importance of upholding the individual and collective mana 3 of research participants was considered through consultation with various parties. The study acknowledged that while children had given permission for their stories to be shared for research, they had not given up ownership of their narratives. Ball, 2005, McNaughton and Smith, 2005. Permission was sought from children to take photographs of their artwork and written material, including questions on information sheets and their assent forms, that could be taken away as evidence. Children were then given the opportunity to keep original copies of the research work. Giving back. Children were presented with a voucher for a retail store to the value of $20 and a certificate of appreciation to acknowledge their contribution to the research and 3 Ante Reo Maori. Mana is a concept that speaks of prestige, authority, control, power, influence, status, spiritual power, charisma. Mana is a supernatural force in a person, place or object. Mana, N.D. 61. Thank them for sharing their stories and experiences. See Appendix L, Certificate of Appreciation. Summary. This chapter provided an overview of the assumptions underpinning the research design, including the positioning of children as active agents of their lives. It outlined the study methodology and methods used to explore children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI. It detailed the different approaches taken at each stage of the research process to ensure that children's voices were heard. The results of the analysis will be presented in the subsequent chapter, Chapter 4 Findings, Giving Voice to Participants' Experiences After Parental TBI. Chapter 4 Findings. The harmony and comfort of home is rocked when TBI shows up at the door. The injury acts as an intruder into family life, causing a ripple that shifts the flow of the whole family unit. Each of the participants in this study had a unique story to tell of their experience of parental injury. Their accounts talked of disruption precipitated by TBI, of negative and positive change, and of their efforts to regulate family life. This chapter serves as the opportunity to hear from children about their experiences and will explore the findings of the research in detail. Firstly, it will describe the participants who took part in the study. Then it will discuss the themes constructed through analysis of children's data, exploring how children appeared to experience an altered sense of being at home after parental TBI. It will consider how the interconnected ideas relating to changes to family cohesion and rhythms and attuning and adjusting to new ways of being as a family contributed to this interpretation of children's experiences after parental TBI. Participant characteristics. 9 children from 7 families were invited to participate in the study. All 9 met the eligibility criteria and opted to be present for a first meeting at their home. To hear more about the study. Of the 9, 7 children, including 2 sets of siblings, chose to take part. 2 children opted not to participate. In one family, the parents were keen for their daughter to participate, feeling passionate about the importance of the topic and the significance of the contribution she could make to the study based on their family experience. However, the child explained that her previous experiences of talking to people, professionals, had been unhelpful and so could not see benefit in participating. In another family, one child, Holly, was keen to participate, but her brother was not. Further details of the participants are presented in Table 3 below. Children were invited to select their own pseudonym for the study, and these names have been used throughout the thesis to maintain participant confidentiality. The interview processes reflected the fluid and responsive nature of the study. Children chose where in the home they wished to be interviewed, with one participant selecting to move between rooms as the interview progressed. All children opted to be interviewed away from their injured parent, and some, but not all, chose to have their non-injured parent available, in the background or with them, while discussion took place. While it was emphasized that the interview was about hearing the children's stories, parents were not prevented from contributing, and at times they asked their own questions of their children's experiences, which offered further insights. Although sibling pairs were given the option to be interviewed together, all took part individually. 64. Table 3, Participant Characteristics. Participant Contextual Information. Matterson. 8 years, female, Maori, NZ European. Living arrangements, Matterson and Tomahawk lived together with their mum, 45 years, NZ European, and dad, 46 years, NZ European, Maori, in a semi-rural setting. Injured parent, dad, 11 months post, self-reported, closed concussion as a result of a sports-related incident, exposure to mechanical force. Received inpatient care at hospital, few days only, i.e. no admission to rehabilitation center. At time of interview receiving ongoing community rehabilitation support. Continues to experience disabling difficulties with fatigue, headaches, sensory sensitivity, mood and personality changes. Work status. Prior to injury, dad worked in full-time paid employment and was beginning a return to work trial on reduced hours. At the time of interview, mum had seen the work doctor who had signed her off work. Tomahawk, 11 years, male, NZ European, Rose. 8 years. Female, NZ European living arrangements, Rose and Hardcore live together with their mom 38 years, NZ European, dad 41 years, NZ European, and older sister 17 years, in an urban setting. Injured parent, dad 4 years, 2 months post, mild TBI as a result of a fall. Self-reported, some loss of consciousness, delayed concussion. No longer in receipt of rehabilitation support. Experienced issues relating to memory, fatigue and regulation of mood, which have improved with adaptations over time. Work status, both parents work full-time. Father changed role following injury. Hardcore. 9 years, male, NZ European. 65. Participant contextual information. Holly. 11 years. Female, NZ European living arrangements, Holly lives with her mom 50 years, NZ European, dad 57 years, NZ European, and brother 9 years, in a rural setting. She has 2 grown-up sisters who live independently. Holly's brother, although eligible, declined to participate. Injured parent, dad 3 years, 8 months post, mild TBI as a result of a road traffic incident. Self-reported, Glasgow Coma Scale score of 14, some loss of consciousness. No longer in receipt of rehabilitation support. Has been able to return to previously enjoyed activities, but with changed capacities and experiences ongoing issues with fatigue, memory and mood. Work status, both parents self-employed, father works full-time. Ava. 10 years. Female, NZ European living arrangements, Ava and her older brother 13 years, live part-time with their mom 52 years, NZ European, and part-time with their dad in an urban setting. Injured parent, mom 5 months post, self-reported mild TBI as a result of exposure to mechanical force. At time of interview receiving ongoing community rehabilitation support. Continues to experience difficulties with cognitive fatigue, headaches and slow processing. Work status, prior to injury mom worked in full-time, paid employment. Since TBI she has returned to work on reduced hours. Riley. 9 years. Female, NZ European living arrangements, Riley lives with her mom 42 years, NZ European, dad 41 years, NZ European, and younger brother, 6 years, in an urban location. Her brother was not eligible to participate in the research. Injured parent, dad, 11 months post, self-reported, severe TBI, injured as a result of a sports-related incident fall. Received inpatient care at hospital and a rehabilitation center 5 weeks. At time of interview receiving ongoing community rehabilitation support. Continues to experience difficulties with memory, fatigue and anxiety. Work status, prior to injury dad worked in full-time paid employment, at time of interview voluntarily completing some part-time hours. Mom works 30 hours a week in paid employment. 66. Experiences of parental TBI, an altered sense of being at home. Each participant's story of parental TBI was unique to them and their family, Bono. Analysis explored the meanings of children's lived experiences in order to construct a thematic representation of their experiences. Van Manen's Existentials Van Manen, 1990, were used as the lens to consider points of convergence, as well as difference, within and between participants' experiences. Analyzing children's lifeworlds in this way offered insights into the ways in which they spoke about the spaces they inhabited, their bodies, and their parents' bodies, their experiences of past, present and future, and their familial relationships, in the context of parental TBI. The thematic structure of the findings offers, as Van Manen, 1990, suggests, the stars to navigate the children's data and explore the meanings of their experiences. The interpretation that children appeared to experience an altered sense of being at home, when living in the context of parental TBI forms the central, guiding thesis of the study. The construction of this overarching idea is scaffolded by the interrelating themes that emphasize the changes children experienced in family life after parental TBI and the ways in which they actively attuned and adjusted to these new ways of being as a family. See Figure 2 below. Accordingly, this chapter will seek to share the ideas captured within these sub-themes to explore the meaning of being at home after parental injury. Figure 2 Thematic Overview. 67. The sense of being at home. Felt space captures the idea that the space in which we find ourselves affects the way we feel. Van Manen, 1990 p. 102. Home is not simply a residence but a way of being in the world, a spatial metaphor for our relationship to places. Manzo, 2003, and an embodied experience of existence within the world. Svenius, 2001. Moore, Carter, Hunt, and Shake, 2013 p. 152. Home, as an experience of space, is special and symbolizes more than the physical presence of a building. It is connected to our sense of self and how we experience the world. Home is where we can be what we are. Van Manen, 1990 p. 102. The sense of being at home is not bound by being within a literal space, but instead refers to the way of being in the world that makes us feel at ease and free to be ourselves. It is a place where we can experience a sense of belonging and control, as well as safety and predictability. Moore et al., 2013, Van Manen, 1990. Children's accounts highlighted that the sense of ease and comfort associated with being at home within family life altered after parental TBI. Their sense of being in the world was disrupted, experiencing uncertainty and disconnection. They faced a number of changes to family cohesion and the day-to-day rhythms and routines of life. This shift toward a sense of feeling, not at home, was seen to be challenging, with accounts of sadness and worry coming through in the children's stories. However, with time, it also provided opportunities for new meaning-making and perspectives as they attuned and adjusted to new ways of being as a family. Changes to family cohesion and rhythms. Home is a place of safety and knowing. Children explained that parental TBI brought about sudden changes to their injured parent, which in turn affected the whole family. As Tomahawk explained. Tomahawk, as soon as Dad got the head injury, like I said, it was almost like a switch had been flicked or something, then all of a sudden we had to get used to this new system in like a day or two. Otherwise he was getting so angry and stuff. 68. The injury caused unexpected disruption to the flow of family life, introducing a lot of chaos, I could say, where before there was predictability. The rhythms of family life are unique within any home. They support a sense of cohesion within the family unit, which operates as a coordinated system of often unspoken routines, rules, expectations, roles, interactions and behaviors. Children's accounts highlighted that parental injury shifted routines, changed roles, rules and expectations, and brought about interactions and behaviors that were new and confusing, contributing to a sense of being not at home. Uncertainty and fear of loss. The stories children shared indicated the period immediately after the incident was a scary time. They described that when they heard the news of the injury, or saw their parent injured, that they felt sad, freaked out, scared, Holly, and in shock. Matterson. Holly recounted what her dad was like when she saw him at the scene of his accident. Holly, he was on the ground and had tons of towels on him, so I didn't really see the bottom of his body, but I saw his head and it was just blood everywhere. Holly's vivid account of her father's injury, more than 3.5 years prior, painted a picture of chaos, but also support. She described the support her and her brother had received from strangers. There were really nice old people who took us into their car, as well as her mum, who remained pretty calm throughout. Holly explained that the early days after her father's injury was a worrying time. She would get upset just thinking about it, to the point that sometimes she felt like she was going to throw up, fearful that her dad would not return from hospital. Researcher, and what were you mainly worried about? Holly, that he would never be able to come back, he'd have to stay in a hospital, 'cause he was pretty old, 50-something. She explained how her mum would reassure her, telling her, he'd be alright, and she would stop crying, but then she would start to think about it more, and get upset again. Hardcore and Riley echoed similar worries of parental loss and each discussed fears they had had at the time of the accident that their parent may die. 69. Researcher, did you feel worried? Hardcore, sort of. Researcher, what were you worried about? Hardcore, that he might die. TBI disrupted the taken for granted predictability of life, introducing uncertainty. While not all children brought up the topic of potential loss and death, those who did kept their discussion to a minimum and suggested it was not a topic they wished to focus on or found easy to talk about. In Riley's case, her account was framed somewhat positively when she explained that seeing her dad in the rehabilitation center had been quite scary but also quite relieving as he didn't die. Home as a place of safety and knowing was disrupted by the sudden nature of TBI, which brought new requirements into children's day-to-day life worlds. Riley's description of visiting her father as an inpatient in hospital, and then the rehabilitation center, drew attention to the discomfort involved in navigating new spaces, which were alien and scary. Seeing her dad in hospital was particularly difficult as it was scary, just like seeing him in that state, vacant and unable to communicate with them, he was only really able to make sounds. She thought it was a good thing that she got to see her dad in hospital and rehabilitation, but also highlighted how seeing him in such foreign environments was worrying. All hospitals, she explained, are really scary, they make me scared, 'cause like it's just like their nature, as did the rehabilitation center, which she explained was a scary place to visit because of how the other people acted. Her report spoke directly of the experience of felt space and the sense of unease introduced by being within spaces that, by their nature, seem to hold inherent characteristics that are unsettling. Changes to the known parent. The unsettling experience of seeing a parent injured included changes in the way they looked and acted. Rose recounted seeing her father soon after he was injured and drew a picture from this time. She explained it was a confusing time as they tried to piece together what had happened when he came home with a mark on his 70 head and yucky stuff vomit on his shoes. She said that he just didn't look right. See Figure 3. Figure 3, Rose's dad. Riley's discussion of her dad's altered appearance in the early weeks after injury was similar. She struggled to find the words to describe how he looked different but said that as he recovered in the rehabilitation center his appearance changed. And his face just got back to normal. Children's perceptions of change to the embodied parent were evident in their discussion, with the sense that the way in which the children knew their parent was altered from the injury. Children were attuned to how their parent should be in the world and the injury disrupted this sense of understanding. Children's stories illustrated that their parents' altered appearance encompassed the changed ways in which they acted that were not right according to their normal ways of being. Hardcore recounted that after the injury his dad acted like a dumb drunk person, he acted weird, like he was nuts. His sister, Rose, 71. Commented further saying how their dad used to act strange, explaining he could be silly and also quite a bit mean. Some behaviors, while bizarre, were not of great concern to children who saw them more as a source of amusement. For example, Ava described some of silly things her mom did some time after her TBI, including serving her breakfast on 2 separate plates. See Figure 4. Figure 4, Ava's breakfast. Ava, well, in the weekends sometimes she brings me breakfast and so she brought my breakfast on 2 plates, it was 1 piece of toast, laughs, and it was on 2 plates, cut in half. Other behaviors were more confusing for children, as Rose recounted when she described her father's difficulties with word finding. Rose, he would say one word and then he'd change it to another word, so he didn't understand what he was saying. Researcher, okay. Can you think of any examples? Rose, like he said, he would say, hi, and then he would say, bye. Researcher, right, okay. And how was that for you when he did that? Rose, I didn't know what he meant, if he was saying hi or bye, 'cause I was only small. Rose's extract draws attention to her interpretation of her father's impairment, whereby she appears to attribute some of the confusion in communication to her own lack of understanding being only small at the time. It speaks to the belief that ordinarily a child, as the smaller person, may expect their parent, as the 72 bigger person, to help them to understand. Rose's account shows that this expectation can be challenged after parental injury, contributing to a sense of unease in terms of knowing how to interact with their changed parent. Rose's interview discussion of her dad's difficulties extended this sense of discomfort in interactions when she described how after his injury her dad didn't know who she was. Rose, he would say one name to me and that's my big sister's name and he would call my big sister Rose, or he would call my brother Rose. He would keep getting the names mixed up so he didn't know if he was calling one, 'cause like he'd go, Rose, and I'd come and he said, no, says clearly, slowly, Rose, and he meant my, so we didn't know if it was, who he wanted. She not only found it confusing that her dad could not differentiate between her and her siblings, but also upsetting. She felt angry that she wasn't recognized by her father for her place of significance within the family. Researcher, why did it make you feel angry? Rose, 'cause my name's Rose and no one else, and I'm the only Rose in this family. For Rose, the change in the dad she knew seemed to be matched by change in how her dad knew her. The changes that children described of the parent they knew appeared to alter their sense of being at home with their parent, whose behavior they could no longer rely on as predictable. As a result, children appeared to experience an altered sense of ease to be themselves, creating uncertainty in how they should interact with their injured parent or act within the home. One area this changed level of predictability was most pronounced was in terms of the impact of anger management issues after TBI. The majority of children discussed changes to their injured parents' level of tolerance and ability to manage their mood. For Tomahawk, the father he knew before his injury as a quiet person, who wouldn't get angry at us, became someone who was quick to lose his temper and would get so angry. As alluded to at the beginning of the chapter, T.67, Tomahawk's experience of his father's injury was like a switch had been flicked, and TBI resulted in sudden changes to the parent he knew. This was true 73. For Holly too, who explained her father's issues with anger management came about as suddenly as the accident itself. Holly, he got pretty angry pretty quick, and, yeah, he just gets stressed. And he would shout a lot, and get tired, and he still gets it now. In Holly's case, the immediate behavioral changes she saw in her father after his injury had endured over the years of his recovery. Although she reflected that he's a bit improving, there was a degree of acceptance, or resignation, that the changes in how her dad acted was something she had learned to live with. Changes to family cohesion. Children gave examples of how issues with anger impacted their interactions with their injured parents, and changed dynamics within the family, creating tension and sadness. Children were not only aware of the impact on themselves but recognized the impact on their non-injured parent, who tried to shield them from their injured parents' changed behavior and anger issues. Holly, he would shout at us, a lot. If we did one thing wrong. And he hadn't asked us not to or anything. He'd just shout at us. Researcher, how did that make you feel? Holly, sad, yeah. Researcher, yeah. Holly, and especially if Mum left us alone with him and we had no one to go to. Holly's account demonstrated a sense of injustice in trying to make sense of her father's anger, which she felt was often directed at her and her brother, and was a disproportionate response to their behavior. Rose too appeared to experience similar feelings in relation to her dad's behavior. She sounded sad when she explained how her dad was really mean to us after his injury and would always tell us off and stuff. Rose said she didn't understand why he got grumpy, and felt that he directed his grumpiness toward her rather than others in the family. He'd be mostly grumpy with me. I brought him food and water and stuff but he didn't want it. So he started getting grumpy with me. Rose's mum added that Rose was 74. Around her dad more than her siblings and made a lot of effort to try and help him. And he would just get frustrated. The other two younger children in the study, Riley and Matterson, both raised the topic of mood changes after injury in response to the opening question of their interviews. It appeared to be another topic that was not necessarily easy to discuss. Matterson swiftly redirected the conversation elsewhere, but did return to the topic later in the interview when her mom was present. She brought up issues relating to her dad's anger and grumpiness and talked about the support they had received when they saw her dad's therapist as a family. Matterson explained that the therapist was there when they needed help, working things out, as someone who could support if maybe there might be like anger issues, or like, if there's been a fight or something and we can't get over it. The older children who brought up the topic of anger in their interviews highlighted the protective role of their non-injured parent during times of conflict. Holly's statement above described how she felt saddest when her mum left them alone with their dad, with no one to go to. Holly explained her mum would tell their dad to stop and he would listen. Tomahawk's narrative told how his mum would take the blame from dad, in order to lessen the level of anger directed towards him and his sister. Tomahawk, she takes a lot of like a little bit of blame from dad, like, if I'm up a bit later because she was helping me with my project, dad would say, he needs to go to bed, and later he'd talk to her or something, or that gets her stressed out. And sometimes if us kids do something she'll take the cop and stuff. I think, she told me the best thing to do, the best thing she can do for herself and that those times is just like say yes to everything, 'cause like, if you say no to something, it gets daddy angry and things carry on. Tomahawk recognized that his mom had also been impacted by his dad's new behavioral difficulties and that this protective role added to her sense of stress. Home is a place of rhythm and routine. In his interview, Tomahawk demonstrated insight into the tension that these issues put on his parents' relationship and the disruption it caused to the normal rhythms of family life. 75. Tomahawk, there's chaos sometimes, between mom and dad have problems because dad of course has got the brain injury, so he either can't understand something properly or he's in a zone where he wants to be so organized for maybe little things and it sort of gets mom a bit stressed in some things. For Tomahawk, his father's sudden need for a new level of order in the home and issues with anger management changed the normal flow of family life, introducing chaos into the home. The feeling of being at home represents a sense of predictability, comfort and ease. Tomahawk's description of life after parental TBI as a place of chaos sits in sharp contrast to this. His account described the impact of TBI on relationships within the home as well as the familiar patterns, roles and responsibilities of family life. The changes to the rhythms and routines contributed to a sense of being not at home. Interestingly, however, Tomahawk stated that as well being chaotic, a positive outcome was that life was also more organized since his father's injury. The seeming paradox of these two statements was not unique to his narrative and several children talked about good and bad changes following parental TBI. The coexisting experiences speak of the complex and dynamic nature of the experience, whereby life after parental injury is not static and in making sense of their experiences positive narratives begin to emerge. For Tomahawk there were positive aspects of the changes that had occurred as a result of TBI. He appreciated how, owing to his dad's new need for order, life had become more organized. He liked that they were now always early for things, meaning he no longer had to be embarrassed arriving late to events and got to spend more time socializing with his friends before school. He said it had also been quite fun, having his dad at home more. He had enjoyed being able to play with him and go on runs together, where before they didn't have time for that. Matterson's account agreed, as she felt the good thing about the head injury is we get to see him dad all the time. Ava spoke positively of the new sense of independence she had gained as a result of the changed routines and roles within the home that had occurred at the time of her mom's injury. 76. Ava, I think it made me a little bit more independent. Yeah, 'cause sometimes I would just moan that I was hungry and then Mom, would suggest certain foods to me, but now I just get up and go grab some food. Rose, too, highlighted that the management of some TBI symptoms could be simultaneously positive and negative. In her description of her dad's issues with fatigue and resulting need for sleep, she spoke of both frustrations and benefits in terms of how they experienced time together post-injury. She said it was annoying how he would agree to read to her, but then would go to sleep before he could. However, she also felt it was kind of good that he was getting more sleep and was at home more, as before his injury, he had to wake up really early in the morning to go to work, so we didn't get to see him. Her account highlighted how changes from adaptations made over time in recovery, such as the need to change work roles, were also regarded positively. Rose said it was quite good after he had gone 'cause he swapped jobs to place, and we got to see him more often because he came home earlier and he went to work later and he could drop us off. The changes to family rhythms meant they could spend more time playing together, where before she felt we didn't get to see him, he always had to work. Changes to the lived space of home, as a shared space experience, went hand in hand with changes to the lived relations between children and their parents. Hardcore made similar observations to his sister, saying since his father's injury, they had more opportunity to play together. Dad is a lot more playful, sometimes he can freak me and Rose out a bit because he lifts us up and nearly makes us touch the roof. When asked if he felt that his dad's new level of playfulness was a good thing or a bad thing, Hardcore replied kind of both. He said it was, kind of, a bad thing 'cause sometimes he can freak us out, yet it was also kind of, a good thing 'cause sometimes it's quite fun. The change in the way in which their father interacted with them was fun, but also a little scary. The behavior was not typical of the role they knew of their father, being more impulsive and risky, which was fun but also did not reflect the predictable behavior they had come to understand in their lived relation as parent and child. As Van Manen, 1990, describes, the special lived relation of parent to child is charged with personal significance, through which the child experiences a fundamental sense of 77. Support and security p. 106. Hardcore's account speaks of a change in the sense of trust he had in his father as being in control, altering the sense of support and security experienced through their relational experience. Again, the account speaks of the complexity of the experience, where some changes after parental TBI were not necessarily regarded to be solely negative or positive, and indeed could be both at the same time. Indeed, positive outcomes of one aspect of change could be offset by the negative outcomes of the same change. For example, children discussed positive outcomes associated with having their injured parent at home more, but at the same time spoke of negative outcomes associated with the changed roles and routines, especially in relation to the stress they observed on their non-injured parent. Concern for the non-injured parent, Tomahawk recognized the stress his mom experienced as a result of dealing with changes that had resulted from his dad's injury. In his interview, he spoke of his parents' role reversal, with his mom being at work more and changes to the usual roles and responsibilities performed in the home. Tomahawk dad has become like mom, where he sort of like stays at home and cleans and stuff and he'll sort things out. He still sort of, at home he does do a bit of work, but not too much. And yeah, mom's going to work every so often. The experienced changes after parental injury created new demands for time and resources. Additional roles performed by the non-injured parent did not only relate to paid employment, but the ways in which they were described as trying to shield the children from the injured parent's aggression. For Tomahawk, as highlighted above, see p.75, he observed the tension that the residual impact of the injury had on his parents' relationship. Both Tomahawk and his sister noted that these new demands had taken a toll on their mom's well-being. She was described by Matterson as being really tired, and Tomahawk as being sick of it now herself. In the pre-interview session, their mom explained how she was not coping and had just been signed off work by the doctor herself. As Tomahawk's account demonstrated, TBI impacted the rhythms of family life. The altered presence of who was in the home contributed to these changes to roles. 78. Responsibilities and routines of family life, which changed over the course of recovery. Initially, the need for inpatient care meant the injured parent was required to stay away from the home, in hospital or rehabilitation. Later, once discharged, the demand for rest and recovery meant the injured parent had to stay at home more than usual. These changes impacted who was physically present in the home and placed additional demands on family life, altering the felt space of home as shared interpersonal space. Like Tomahawk, other children recognized these experiences as being stressful for their non-injured parent. Holly explained that the early period after her dad's injury was not only scary but was also difficult for the impact it had on family life. Mom got stressed a lot because dad wasn't there. The family had to add in regular visits to the hospital to see their father, alongside the usual chores associated with managing the home and livestock that remained despite their dad's absence. Holly saw the impact of this on her mom and stated, sometimes, mom got really annoyed and stressed and she would just slam doors and let it all out. Riley also recognized that her mom, the non-injured parent, bore a lot of stress. During the more acute phase of recovery, researcher, how do you think it's been for your mom? Riley, stressing. Researcher, stressing, yeah. And what makes you think it's stressing? Riley, I don't know, just like organizing the family and yeah, on edge of crying. Researcher, organizing the family as in your dad, you and your brother. Riley, brother, yeah. Researcher, okay. How does she have to organize? Riley, school, work, money. Researcher, so do you think she has to do it more on her own now? At the moment. Riley, no, not anymore. Researcher, not anymore, but at that time. 79. Riley, yeah. Holly and Riley both described how their families received support from others, including wider family, who helped out with practical aspects of home life such as provision of meals and support to look after them and their siblings. The children recognized that this support was helpful for their respective families. However, this practical support, as Riley illustrates below, did not make up for the disruption to family cohesion caused by the injury over this acute phase. Home is a place of togetherness and connection. The connectivity of the family unit was impacted by not only Riley's dad's absence from the home, staying as an inpatient, but also her mom's absence. Mom, I wasn't here a lot, was I, sweetie? Riley, sounds sad, no. Researcher, where was Mom? Riley, at the hospital, or at rehabilitation center, or at work, or something like that. The emotion during this interview conversation was palpable. Riley spoke to her mom, as well as me as the interviewer, when she explained that the absence of both her parents from the home was a little bit hard, saying that she just missed them a little bit. Riley recounted that her mom would get home after she had gone to bed and so she would only see her very briefly in the day. Riley revealed the impact of her mother's absence on her in showing empathy for her brother's experience. Researcher, and how do you think it was for brother? Riley, well, I guess it was hard as well for him cause he didn't really have anyone to talk to either in her dad's absence. Riley's mom was also less available for her and her brother. Her mom's typical role as someone who offered support and reassurance to the children was disrupted by the challenges of managing parental injury, and Riley felt she didn't have anyone to talk to during this time. Her conversation emphasized that the emotional support normally offered by her mom was not easily substituted. Over the acute phase of recovery, she missed having her mom available, as the person she wanted to talk to, where having others available was not necessarily the issue. In addition to the actual absence of their non-injured parent from the home, children experienced a sense of reduced availability due to the stress they could see that their parents were also experiencing after TBI. Similar to Riley, Matterson shared a conversation with her mom about how she had found her reduced availability difficult since her dad's injury. She explained that it was hard to find a good time to talk with her mom, aware of the pressure she was under. Mom, do you feel like you've ever really wanted to talk to Mom about Dad's head injury? Matterson, well, I did want to, but you never let me, cause you're like, arg, it's always a school day when I try to talk to you and I always think it's the wrong time, but you just don't let me get time to talk, so I just. Mom, so is there anything you want to ask me now? I'm happy for you to ask me. Matterson, I have asked you one question though, Mom, yeah. Matterson, but, like, when is Dad's brain injury going to end? Mom, sighs it says, yeah. Matterson, is this the last year? Or is it the next year is it going to end? Mom, that's a really good question, like, I'm really glad that you asked me that. Matterson, cause I'm wondering. Mom, okay. So with head injuries we don't know. Matterson, cause they said in 2 years it would end. Mom, they did. The conversation revealed how Matterson wanted to talk with her mom in order to help process the event and make sense of what the injury meant for the future. The uncertainty introduced from TBI extends beyond the concern of loss in the acute phases of recovery and extends into wonderings about the future. As Matterson's question demonstrated, making sense of recovery after TBI is a 81 challenging process. Parental TBI introduced new anxieties into daily life as children experienced, with awareness, uncertainty and change in family life roles and connectivity after injury. Coming back to the whole, altered sense of being at home. Home is a place of safety and knowing, rhythm and routine, and togetherness and connection changed as a result of parental injury. The ease and comfort associated with being at home shifted when children experienced the sudden, confusing and frightening event of parental TBI. It altered the familiarity of daily life, the spaces they navigated and how they knew their parents. Children's narratives showed how initial disruption caused a shock to their sense of being at home with their injured parent, as the familiarity of the person they knew as their parent was altered after TBI. Their parents' behavior was strange to them, and they were left questioning what was not right about their parent, both in terms of appearance and behavior. Their stories also demonstrated that with time a process of attunement and adjustment enabled children to become more familiar with new aspects of their parents' behavior and personality, allowing them to get to know their change parents and adjust to new ways of being as a family. Attuning and adjusting to new ways of being as a family. Home is a place of negotiation. Parental injury changed family cohesion and rhythms and impacted how children felt and the ways in which they would normally act and interact with others in the home. Children's accounts demonstrated they adapted their behavior in order to accommodate the changes and regulate the disruption to family life. Tomahawk's opening extract, T.67, spoke of the sudden changes they saw in their father after injury and the equally immediate need to respond, having to get used to this new system in like a day or two. Tomahawk highlighted that there was abrupt change in terms of his dad's expectations of how they should act within the home, whereby, all of a sudden, he expected this and that, he expected us to do all these things. Like other children in the study, Tomahawk's narrative showed that he was not a passive bystander to these changes, but instead took steps to make 82 sense, monitor and adapt behavior accordingly, attuning to the injured parent and adjusting to the new system. Seeking harmony. The process of attuning and adjusting to life after parental injury was regarded to relate to an effort to find harmony and restore the sense of being at home. The early phase of parental injury was challenging for children, disrupting their sense of understanding and ease at being in the world. Children's accounts appeared to demonstrate how they attuned to the welfare of the family system, putting their own needs aside, recognizing a call to keep going and soldier on. Riley explained. She managed to fight through by telling herself, it will all get better. Similarly, Tomahawk explained the time was a bit hard but we managed to get through it, stating there wasn't really anything that helped him, he just sort of had to push through everything. Children's narratives highlighted that over time they supported the process of seeking harmony within the home by tuning into new ways of knowing and connecting as a family. Their accounts provided examples of the ways in which they monitored their parents' appearance and behavior in order to make judgments as to how they may be feeling or likely to act. They then adapted their play and behavior accordingly, to accommodate the needs of the injured parent. Those children who discussed their parents' issues with mood shared how they coped by removing themselves from the situation, going to their own rooms when conflicts arose. Holly, for example, said that when her dad became angry and shouted at them she would go to her room and sit down, lie down, both to get out of his way and also to give herself some space. Tomahawk also told how he would retreat to his room, or go outside, to avoid becoming entangled in the mess of arguments. He shared that, like his mum had said above, T.74, the best approach when his father lost his temper was to avoid escalating issues and instead would try to keep up with him, in order to appease him. Tomahawk, well, when it gets to that stage, I just do everything dad says, soft laugh, I just try and do that and keep up with him and then, yeah, or sort of stay in my room or something if it was at home and just do things, just do stuff that I want to do. 83. Similarly, when Riley spoke about her dad's anger issues, she recounted that she too would remove herself from the situation and usually go to her room. She explained that she did this to try and help diffuse the situation, to give everybody some space, and found it worked as when she returned things would have calmed down. Children's accommodations of their injured parents' needs were not without frustration. Children's accounts spoke of a sense of dictated changes to the ways they were able to be within their own homes, normally the space where we can be what we are. Van Manen, 1990 p. 102. In her interview, Matterson describes this sense of not being at home in her own home. Matterson, we just never got to have time to play and you always said, we always get to play inside and you always said, oh you have to play outside, and we love playing inside. And then you said oh we have to take, if there was something inside you said we have to take it outside, cause once when me and Tomahawk were playing rough and tumble and, or if we were playing with the balls and we start going a bit crazy and start yelling you would say, whispers get outside. Mum, yeah. Matterson, and Mum, and why do you think I said that? Matterson, sounding impatient, because Dad has a brain injury. Mom, and how does that make you feel? Matterson, I feel kinda like we're never allowed inside. The extract captures the tension that the disruption and required adjustments created for Matterson. While she understood her dad's new demands for a quiet recovery space, simultaneously she still wanted to enjoy the opportunity to play without constraint, where she chooses within her home. The restrictions placed upon her previously enjoyed freedoms altered her sense of being at home in her play and contributed to the impression she gave of almost feeling barred from her home. I feel kinda like we're never allowed inside. 84. New knowings. Children's accounts provided insights into the dynamic nature of their understandings and experiences of parental TBI over time. Strategies they used to cope with the changes in life at home appeared to be different as recovery and life moved on. Their narratives related to how they made sense of their past, present and future, discussing future with a sense of uncertainty, resignation or hope. Some highlighting changes to their outlook and perspectives on life. The insights children shared related to their individual family, phono experiences. Participants were dealing with a range of parental impairments, at different stages of recovery, from 5 months to over 4 years post-injury. In Ava's case, for example, she did not report her mom had any issues with mood or anger management after her injury 5 months prior. She felt minimal impact from her mom's issues with memory, explaining it had been okay, as she had just gotten used to it after a while. This idea of just getting used to parental changes was repeated across participants' narratives, however, while the same phrase was used by participants, its meaning was not universal across accounts. In Holly's case, for example, her description emphasized a level of resignation about the lack of potential for future improvement as she observed that her father's impairments, of fatigue and forgetfulness, as well as anger issues, had endured over the 3.5 years since his injury. In terms of his difficulties with anger, she explained that she had just got used to it now and rather than removing herself from the situation sometimes found it helpful to shout back at him. Her change in strategy in dealing with her dad's behavioral issues appeared to suggest a changed way of being at home with her dad, who she now knows in new ways and is more comfortable, or willing, to confront, rather than avoid. For Tomahawk and Riley, their dad's injuries had both occurred 11 months prior to interview and they shared similar accounts of issues with anger, which although were ongoing, had improved over time. They both spoke about their hopes for continued improvement. Alongside their parents' own journey of recovery and adaptation to their impairments, Tomahawk's and Riley's accounts highlighted how they became more attuned to the needs that resulted from the impact of 85 injury and therefore better able to respond in helpful ways. With time, they were more able to spot the triggers for symptoms or situations that may result in anger, and knew to adapt their behavior accordingly. For example, Tomahawk explained that he had sort of got used to the routine that surrounded their dad's injury and stated it was less chaotic now that their dad was more aware of the support he needed from them to manage his symptoms and help control his issues with mood. Tomahawk, no, he's better, he can control his anger now, and he tells us to sort of lower our voices or something or lower noise down or something like music or something, he'll say it's too loud, I've got a headache, turn it down. It appeared that over time, Tomahawk had learned that it was best to try and listen to his dad and do what he asked, as this helped his dad to manage his symptoms and behavior and thus avoid conflict. He stated his advice to other children would be to do what their parent says, warning that otherwise it doesn't conclude very well, especially in the early stages. Tomahawk, I would probably say just listen a bit more and yeah don't try and wind him up or anything, just sort of listen to what he says, just listen pretty much. By tuning into his dad's needs, Tomahawk was better able to predict his father's behavior and thus regulate the impact on him, supporting efforts to bring harmony into the home. Matterson too showed that she had learned to read her father's presentation to assess how he was feeling. She used his appearance and behavior to judge how he was, noting that she could tell if he was well by the activities he was doing, e.g. house chores, work. She explained she felt he had been looking better recently as before, he was always pale when he came back but now he has his color back. Riley, too, described how, over time, she had learned to read her father's body for cues as a way of predicting his behavior. She spoke about the improvement she had seen in her dad and shared that he no longer got angry like he used to, like angry. Riley and her mother joked together about how they knew when her dad was about to lose his temper, as he would get his angry face. Mum, like I'll say to Riley, oh did he get his angry face? 86. Riley laughs. Mum, so yeah, and we know if things, like look at each other and go, Riley, time to leave. They both demonstrated what the angry face looked like and discussed how it not only offered an understood signal just between the pair of them but also served as a source of shared humor. It appeared to provide an opportunity for Riley and her mum to connect and share in making light of the situation together. Other children talked about how their families used humor as a way of coping with the changes brought about after parental injury. Children described nicknames and jokes about the injured parent that they shared with their non-injured parent, as well as those that they shared as a family to recount behavior or experiences which retrospectively they could laugh about together. Constructing and retelling stories together created shared understandings and representations of their realities. Riesman, 1993. The process appeared to offer families a way of taking control of the narratives of their experiences, serving to support connection within the home. Taking active roles to support and reconnect. Connectivity within the family was important to children. They actively attuned to their parents' needs not only to regulate the impact of changes on themselves, but also as a way of supporting their parents after injury. Children provided examples of the ways they tried to actively respond to their parents' needs by offering practical help around the home. For example, Rose explained how she tried to look after her dad by taking him food and water and telling him to stay in bed and rest. Ava, too, described how her and her brother supported their mum after her injury by helping to make dinner. Tomahawk shared that he thought it was important to help a bit more with things, like maybe if it was the dishes or just taking the washing out to support the family. This assistance was also intended to relieve the strain experienced by the non-injured parent. Holly, for example, shared how her mum had asked for some help and she enjoyed the opportunity to take responsibility for shifting the family's livestock. Rather than describing such roles 87 as burdensome, children appeared keen to be able to offer some assistance to their families after parental TBI. Children also revealed other, more subtle ways they tried to support their parents. In an example provided by Matterson, she described a time when her dad was getting headaches and struggling to sleep in the day, and how she tried to help him by sleeping with him. Although less explicit, these forms of support were equally purposeful in intent, and were described in children's efforts to monitor and protect their parents. Children appeared concerned for their injured parents' well-being in new ways after TBI. Both Tomahawk and Matterson spoke about a new level of family monitoring that occurred in regard to their dad's absence from the home, whereby they had a heightened sense of awareness in terms of how long he had been out for fear that it could mean he had re-injured himself. Similarly, Rose shared her experience of wanting to remain close to her dad after he was injured so she could check that he was okay. Rose, I stayed home instead of going to daycare. Researcher, oh did you? Why did you stay home? Rose, because I wanted to stay and help my daddy to make sure he was okay. Children's discussions challenged assumptions of typical roles between parent and child, demonstrating care, support, and even protection for their parents. In another example of this, Matterson drew pictures of activities she enjoyed doing with her dad, before and after his injury. To the process of drawing and talking, she described some limitations her father's injury had placed on some activities, but she also shared adjustments she herself had made to their activities. As she drew, she narrated about her and her dad's enjoyment of tree climbing together, see Figure 5 below. She explained that, prior to his injury, they climbed trees, really high together, and when she got scared, he would have to help her to climb down. She said when they went tree climbing recently they didn't climb it very high, as she chose not to go very high so as to not risk her father having to help her. I didn't want my dad to help me if I went too high, because he could fall, because his brain injury, we don't want another head injury. 88. Figure 5, Matterson climbing a tree with her dad. Few children spoke about specific support they received or strategies they used to support themselves. Children were selective about who they spoke to about what was going on at home, saying they avoided talking to peers or teachers for different reasons. They weren't sure they could trust them, they didn't feel they would truly understand, or that when they were away from home they just tried to forget about it. Some children said that it might have been helpful to have opportunity to talk with other children going through similar experiences to their own. Riley mentioned that she found interacting with pets was a form of support, as it relaxed her, as did focusing on creative hobbies. In their interviews, Tomahawk and Riley discussed having had some engagement with professional supports in relation to their dad's injuries, but with equally 89 mixed results. Tomahawk explained that his initial experience with a psychologist wasn't the greatest experience. He recounted how he felt she was aiming everything at him, telling him, in not the nicest of tones, that he needed to be understanding of his dad's injury and had to help him. Tomahawk contrasted this with a second, more positive experience with psychologists at his dad's rehabilitation service who were good listeners. He explained they didn't just tell you what you're doing wrong or what you need to do, they ask. Riley also found her experience with the psychologist was too focused on providing her with information about the brain. When asked if it had been helpful seeing them, she replied, sort of, I guess, well, if I wanted to become a brain scientist, then yeah, she stated it would have been more helpful to know how he would react to certain things. Through their interviews, children demonstrated how they were engaged in their own processes of making sense of the injury, trying to tune in and adjust to new ways of being as a family. Summary. As the themes have highlighted, children experienced change to the usual, familiar rhythms shaping family life, and after parental injury were required to tune in to adjust to these changes. Ordinarily, the rhythms of family life offer comfort in their predictability and shared understanding. The familiar routines, roles, rules and expectations shape an experience of ease with daily life, providing a sense of being at home. The children's narratives revealed ways in which the changes in adjustment following parental TBI altered this sense of ease and comfort, appearing to leave children, at times, feeling not at home in their lives at home with their families. Once again, the stories children shared demonstrated that while challenging, the experienced discomfort also brought the possibility for new insights as they found new ways of being as a family. For some children, the altered sense of being at home following parental TBI appeared to provide space for reflection and insight going forward. Riley explained that the experienced disruption to family life after TBI had provided a new sense of perspective. The altered sense of being at home had resulted in a positive outcome. Riley described feeling a greater sense of connection to her family as a result of their shared experiences over the last 11 months, 90. Riley, I guess that like just the separation of all of us has sort of like brung us closer together. Mom, yeah, definitely, a stronger family unit. Riley, yeah, like we realize how much we'd miss each other. In this chapter, the interpretation that children experience an altered sense of being at home after parental injury has been explored, drawing on the voices of children living in the context of parental TBI. In the next chapter, Chapter 5 discussion, these findings will be discussed within the context of relevant literature. A critical consideration of potential implications for clinical research and practice will be offered, followed by acknowledgement of the strengths and limitations of the research and directions for future research. 91. Chapter 5 discussion. The aim of this study was to explore children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI in order to inform how we might better work with families after brain injury. This study has found that children experienced an altered sense of being at home after parental TBI. The themes highlighted that children experienced changes to family cohesion and rhythms and took an active role in tuning in and adjusting to new ways of being as a family. This chapter will discuss the findings in relation to existing research, exploring the implications for clinical and research practice within rehabilitation. It will review the strengths and limitations of this study, alongside suggestions for future research. Hearing from children, insights gained. The current study set out to explore what could be learned from listening to children and hearing their interpretations of the everyday world of recovery and adaptation after TBI by asking them about their experiences of living in the context of parental TBI. Consistent with my previous experience, I found hearing from children offered new ways of seeing and understanding. Their accounts not only offered insight into their experiences as children living in the context of parental TBI, but also presented ideas that, as I will elucidate, relate more broadly to new ways of seeing the shared spaces of recovery for all people after TBI. The study findings support and extend previous research exploring children's experiences of parental ABI. They draw attention to the impact parental injury has on children in the home, and also their efforts to influence and moderate the impact of injury on their parents. Children's stories heard within this research resonate with those reported earlier, within Chapter 2, Literature Review, and similarly spoke of experienced shock, uncertainty and loss, and active roles of support and sense-making. Butera Prinzi and Perlas, 2004, Harris and Stewart, 2006. Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, Moreno Lopez et al., 2011. The message from existing research that parental ABI impacts upon children within the home is echoed by the current study. This study's findings extend existing understandings, 92. Showing children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI relate to an altered sense of being at home with their family. Children experienced sudden change to the ease in knowing who their parent was after injury and how they should be in relation to them. They experienced change to the usual, predictable flows of lived time as a family, and were required to navigate new spaces while simultaneously encountering a sense of disruption to the shared space of home. Children were not passive bystanders of these experiences, but were actively involved in reciprocal roles of support to find new ways of being as a family after parental TBI. Children's accounts illuminated the significance of home as a special space experience. Van Manen, 1990. The approach of purposefully taking notice and reflecting on lived space, alongside the other existentials, allowed for an enriched understanding of the meaning of home and at-homeness for children after parental TBI. The discussion offered below seeks to examine the significance of home as a special space experience, as reported by children, and, by implication for the adults with whom children share relational and physical space. The special space experience of home. Home refers to an inner space and is an area of security and peace. Home is a space in which we are protected, hidden and safe. It is a space that is familiar, and a space into which we can withdraw and be ourselves. Norlick, Martinson, and Dahlberg, 2013, p. 4. The space experience of home is considered special as it is the place we can feel most comfortable and free to be what we are. Van Manen, 1990, where we can feel most at home. Yet, as the current study has illustrated, the home, as a lived experience, is dynamic and not always experienced in this way. For the children within this study, the experience of home changed in the context of parental TBI, influencing how they felt and how and who they could be. The felt space of home. The understanding of home as a special space experience relates to how it is felt as a space. Home, characterized by the sense of at-homeness, is a space known intimately. It is the place where one can feel a freedom to be, can rest in 93. Regenerate, have a sense of possession, control and privacy and experience warmth of atmosphere. Seaman, 2015, p. 84. Attachment to home is associated with the experience of athomeness, the taken for granted situation of being comfortable and familiar with the world in which one lives his or her day-to-day life. Seaman, 2015, p. 79. The changes to family cohesion and rhythms discussed by children altered their experiences of the felt space of home. Home as a place of safety and knowing instead became a space of fear and uncertainty as children coped with the shock of the TBI event. Their accounts echoed those reported by other authors who have explored experiences of children living in the context of parental illness and impairment. Across different contexts, studies have shared children's accounts of shock, fear and anxiety when illness or injury threatens the stability and security of daily life, e.g. Ahlstrom, Scarsater, and Danielson, 2011, J. Allen and Oyubode, 2009, Clemens, 2009, Davy, Tubbs, Kissel, and Nino, 2011, Garley, Gallup, Johnston, and Pipitone, 1997, Helseth and Ulfseat, 2003, Stifler, Barada, Jose, and Haas, 2008. Studies looking at children's experiences of parental cancer, for example, have described themes that discuss a world turned upside down. Stifler et al., 2008, p. 935, Where Young People's Lives Are Unraveled by Parental Diagnosis. Clemens, 2009, p. 573, With Illness Taking a Position as the New Permanent Resident in the Household. Davy et al., 2011, p. 82, Ruling the Family, Helseth and Ulfseat, 2003, p. 358. Their accounts demonstrate how parental diagnosis, and the uncertainty it entails, intrude on life and create an unpleasantness of home. Stifler et al., 2008, p. 936. The themes seem to highlight comparable experiences to children's within the current study, where home, as the place known intimately, with a sense of privacy and control, is challenged as illness, uninvited, takes residence, and governs daily life. For patients, illness is regarded to have the power to radically change an individual's lifeworld, disrupting the individual's being in the world. Norlick et al., 2013, p. 8. In their study exploring experiences of lived space, they found patients felt more able to be themselves at home, in comparison to alien, hospital environments, but even the familiar and kind space of home could become 94 problematic due to restrictions caused by illness. The space of home was seen to change in the context of illness, becoming overwhelmed by discomfort and insecurity. p. 5. Similar observations have been made for adults recovering after ABI, where the significance of home as part of one's identity has been emphasized. Home is not static, but fluid, and like one's identity, is constantly repositioned and reproduced over time. After stroke, people experience abrupt, sudden changes in their personality and struggle to accommodate their changed selves in an unchanged house, which does not feel like home anymore. Mayharing, Naninga, and Lettinga, 2016, p. 36. The children's accounts in the current study demonstrate the experience of disruption to one's lifeworld, and the sense of being not at home in the home is not limited to patients themselves. The overwhelming discomfort and insecurity extends to others with whom the patient shares physical and personal space. The sense of home is a safe haven. Carroll, Morby, Balog, and Araos, 2009, p. 545, changed in the context of parental TBI, as the feeling of home as free and familiar became uncertain for children. Home as a place of uncertainty appeared to create a sense of not at homeness, as parental TBI made children confront fears of parental loss and required them to navigate new, scary places, such as hospitals and rehabilitation centers. In their study looking at the notion of home in experience of hospice day care, Moore et al., 2013, described patients' fear of entering hospice. Their fears related to those seen in the current study, which underscored how clinical settings such as hospitals and rehabilitation centers, like hospices, can hold inherent characteristics that, by their nature, are scary and have assumed meanings, for example, as a place to die. In contrast to health professionals who may feel at home in such settings, for the sense of professional identity associated with place. Heath et al., 2012, the spaces were alien to children, and indeed patients in Moore et al., 2013, who felt not at home and ill at ease. Hospital was scary for the sudden uncertainty it introduced into children's lives. The experienced uncertainty of parental injury, and feeling of not at homeness, also impacted upon how children felt within the home. Moore et al., 2013, describe how an individual's experience of uncertainty around their illness can 95 leave them drifting, whereby they are cast out of their familiar world, experiencing chaos, drifting in a meaningless space. p. 154. Illness can leave a person feeling alienated from their normal day-to-day world, experiencing an existential outsideness, a sense of not belonging. p. 154. Feeling not at home in the world. Children in the current study similarly provided accounts that spoke of the sense of introduced chaos into their day-to-day existence. Changes to the known parent, who was previously familiar and predictable, altered the warmth of atmosphere of life at home for children. Children in the current study described change to their injured parent's behavior as being scary, confusing and frustrating. Issues with parental mood, especially anger management, created feelings of tension in the home and left children feeling sad. Similar issues were reported in other studies exploring children's experience of parental abuse, which also seemed to speak to change in the felt space of home. Some described feeling uncomfortable at home and said they would not bring friends home or host parties. A boy aged 15 explained how he did not think of this sick, injured father when with friends, but every time he came home he felt a lump in his stomach before opening the front door, because he did not know what mood his father would be in. Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, p. 1566. The experiences sit in contrast to the notion of at-homeness, which emphasizes a comforting feel of home, where one can relax and enjoy a positive atmosphere. Moore et al., 2013, p. 155, Seaman, 2015. The extract from Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, illustrates the sense unease where children appeared restricted in the space experience of home, and for this boy, a sense of dread for what atmosphere may await at home. As Seaman, 2015, notes, to be ill at ease connotes sickness, and this boy's experience serves as an example of how space is felt as part of oneself, a lump in the stomach, as an embodied experience which can impact feelings and direct behavior. Children's experiences of parental abuse appear similar to those seen in studies exploring parental cancer and mental health issues, which also provide examples of experience that are indicative of sense of felt unease within life at home. For example, Helseth and Ulfseed, 2003, describe how parental cancer was seen to affect the emotional climate in the family, bringing insecurity and worries into daily 96. Life t.358. Similarly, children experiencing parental mental illness describe the change in atmosphere at home, when family life became uncertain. Ahlstrom et al. 2011, p. 564, and unpredictable. Tronson, 2012. Children in the current study provided accounts that spoke of the worries brought into daily life after parental TBI. Van Manen, 2002, discusses the idea that the call to care for another is expressed as worry. Rather than a sense of duty or obligation, worrying is regarded to be the spiritual glue that keeps the mother or father affixed to the life of their child. p. 264. Children's accounts within the current study suggest that the experience of caring as worrying extends to children within the home. Children's narratives highlighted worries relating to their injured parents' symptoms and behavior, about the risk of further injuries, and about loss. Through their accounts, it could be seen that children were actively engaged in efforts to monitor and support their parents. For example, children tried to take care of their injured parent by offering food, lying with them to help them sleep, and adapting their play to try and protect them from further injuries. In their research exploring children's constructions of home, Kaironlampi-Kilmanen and Mata, 2012, similarly suggest care for parental well-being is a source of worry for children. Kaironlampi-Kilmanen and Mata reported the young children in their study viewed home as a place of their own, a place of joy and togetherness, a place for play, and also a place filled with worries. Children expressed their worries for their parents' tiredness and frustrations at how much their parents worked at home. The authors described the ways in which children sought to actively organize the home to support their parents, reduce their tiredness and maintain a level of closeness with them. T.79. Just as seen in the current study, their finding contests the assumption of childhood as carefree and demonstrates children's agency as active participants within their lives. Christensen and James, 2008. It is important to recognize that life at home is not necessarily devoid of worries for children. For those living in the context of parental illness or injury, including participants within the current study, worries included issues relating to mortality and loss through hospitalization, death, or separation, e.g. Finch and Gibson, 2009, Harris and Stewart, 2006, Tronson, 2012, Zollis, 2001. 97. The interpersonal space of home. For children in the current study, the significance of home as a special space experience relates to the idea that it is shared space, as a family. Home is the center point of world experiences and highlights human qualities, emotional bonds and the personal relationships within the home. Carroll et al., 2009 p. 541. Home is a relational space. It is a place defined by interpersonal interactions, Johnson and Bebo, 2014, which contribute to a sense of freedom to be what we are and an understanding of ourselves in relation to others with whom we share the space, Van Manen, 1990. For children living in the context of parental TBI, the shared, interpersonal space of home was impacted by injury. Children experience change to their known ways of being, individually and as a family. Children in the current study experienced an altered sense of ease in relation to their injured parent. As earlier stated, T.76, the lived relation between parent and child is special and deeply personal, offering the child a fundamental sense of support and security. Van Manen, 1990 p. 106. Children described how their parent, previously known through this personally significant relation, changed after injury and appeared to be strange to them, acting, behaving and interacting in ways that were unusual to them. They experienced a sense of discomfort as the taken for granted ways of being together altered after injury. Changes in parent-child relationships after parental injury have been reported across studies looking at parental Abbey, Butera Prinzi and Perlas, 2004, Harris and Stewart, 2006, Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, Moreno Lopez et al., 2011, as well as those looking at early-onset parental dementia, J. Allen and Oyubode, 2009, Svanberg, Stott, and Spector, 2010. Such studies describe the ambiguous nature of the losses Boss, 1999, children experienced within changed relationships after parental brain injury or disease. In Svanberg et al., 2010, children spoke of the need to develop a new relationship with their parent, experiencing a loss of the person they had known before dementia, their not being, themselves, they're not the same person. p. 743. Further, J. Allen and Oyubode, 2009, observed that most participants in their study felt they had lost their real father, suffering not 98. Only a loss of the previous relationship, but also for experiences they had anticipated for their future selves, impacting upon who they felt they could be in the future. For children in the current study, home as a relational space was impacted by parental injury. Changes to family life at home came about suddenly. It was almost like a switch had been flicked, creating chaos, as roles, routines and expectations suddenly shifted. This shift included a change to who was physically present within the home, with some children experiencing the extended absence of the injured parent from life at home with family or experiencing change to who worked out of the home. Managing the demands of the injured family member was recognized to place additional burden on the non-injured parent, who children described as stressed and less available to offer them emotional support. Children described missing their parents, and feeling like they had no one to talk to. The sense of home as a place of togetherness and connectivity was altered after parental TBI. Children living in other contexts of parental illness or impairment have been reported to experience similar disruption to family connectivity in the wake of parental ill health. Ahlstrom et al., 2011, for example, describe how parental depression alters the usual reciprocal roles of support within the home, resulting in fewer opportunities for togetherness in family life. T.565. Similarly, in their study exploring experiences of parental cancer, Stifler et al., 2008, emphasize how daughters mourned the loss of their mothers as they had known them, when their treatment made them less available and left a hole where mom used to be. p. 936. They felt profound loss related to not being able to rely on their mothers, loss of their mother's companionship, and loss of their mother's involvement in their everyday activities. I think I just needed attention from my mom. Others can give you as much attention, but it's not the same. When you are 14 years old, they can give you attention but they don't understand the kind of attention that you need. Stifler et al., 2008, p. 936. The extract resonates with the description Holly shared in the current study of how she just missed her parents, and missed having her mom, the non-injured 99. Parent, available is the person she wanted to be with and talk to about what they were going through, as having other people available was just not the same. The experiences speak to an altered way of being in the world that was apparent across studies, which emphasized how a change in the normal balance of relationships within the home could reduce the emotional availability of both the ill and well parent. Children are less able to rely on their parents in ways they were used to, feeling loss of connection to those who normally offer them a fundamental sense of support and security. Van Manen, 1990. These findings resonate with the sense of absent presence described in research looking at parental experiences after Abby Kitzmuller et al., 2012, where parents report feeling both physically and emotionally absent from their children after injury. Edwards et al., 2014. The relational space of home was also impacted upon by the mood of people within the space. As indicated above, issues with anger management contributed to a negative atmosphere at home, CP.95, appearing to add to children's feelings of sadness, confusion and frustration. The space in which we find ourselves affects the way we feel. It is possible to say that we become the space we are in and the space becomes us. Norlick et al., 2013, p. 4. The mood of the injured parent affected the mood of the home and how children felt themselves. Similar accounts are seen in studies looking at children's experiences of parental mental illness. For example, Ahlstrom, Scarsater, and Danielson 2009 explored families' ways of living with major depression and showed how the ill parent's mood impacted the feelings of everyone in the home. When she feels bad, I feel like I have no energy to do anything either. p. 312. Children's accounts demonstrated how the mood of the home is felt. You notice it right away. It's enough to just look at her, then I saw what kind of day it would be. It was almost in the air and you could sense how it was going to be later, during the day. p. 312. The space experience of home impacts how we feel, and equally is impacted by how we feel. 100. Renegotiating the special space of home. Children's accounts in the current study provided examples of how their concerns and perspectives of living in the context of parental TBI changed over time, emphasizing the lived space of home is not static. As stated, the fluidity of home is constantly repositioned and reproduced over time, in relation to the people within the space. Children's narratives underscored the role they played, as active members of the family system and contributors to the shared identity of home, in renegotiating the special space experience of home. With time, children attuned to their changed parent and new requirements of the home space, enabling a new sense of familiarity to be formed, renewing predictability within the home. Children described how over time they had become better able to spot triggers for behavior or situations where their parent may struggle to cope. They described how they tuned into their parents' appearance and behavior to spot signs that they were struggling, a finding reported elsewhere in parental Abby literature where children were described as highly attuned to parents' well-being. Moreno-Lopez et al., 2011, p. 1228. Similar descriptions are seen in studies of childhood experience of parental illness, where children are engaged in a process of monitoring their parents' physical and emotional states in order to make sense of the changed context of home, making effort to protect their parents from further strain. For example, studies looking at parental breast cancer report how children became watchers of their mothers. Zollis, 2001, p. 1024, and keenly aware of their parents' moods, levels of energy, and side effects of treatment. Davy et al., 2011, p. 84. Studies looking at parental mental illness explain how children's attentiveness to their parents reduced the level of unpredictability within the home as they learned to read the signs of illness. Ahlstrom et al., 2011. In other studies, monitoring appeared to offer children reassurance as they could make sense of their parents' behavior and put it in perspective. Garley et al., 1997. Helseth and Ulfseed, 2003. In being better able to predict their parents' behavior, children in the current study, and indeed others, appeared to reduce the level of uncertainty experienced within the home. They actively made adjustments to their own ways of being in the home in order to accommodate the changed needs of their parent, supporting 101 them to manage the symptoms of their injury. Negotiating the home space in this way was not necessarily straightforward, with some children expressing frustration at their restrictions in being able to use the home space as they chose. However, children also reported positive aspects of the renegotiations, feeling they had experienced opportunity to find new ways of being, personally and as a family. Positive changes appeared to impact upon their sense of self, experiencing increased independence or the chance to contribute to family life in different ways. Children also described positive outcomes of their injured parent being home more since their TBI, which influenced their sense of connection in relation to them. Children's accounts demonstrated that adjustment to life after parental TBI involved change to the felt and interpersonal space of home. Their descriptions emphasized the importance of looking at the wider context of a person's life to consider how the special space experience of home may influence a person's recovery after injury. Implications for rehabilitation. The study findings highlight the need to acknowledge children as family members impacted by parental TBI. Children need to be recognized for their reciprocal position within the family system. Rolland, 1999, being not only impacted by the injury, but also influencing the impact of the injury on the family. The need to acknowledge and recognize children within such contexts includes clinicians working directly with families, as well as those directing policy and research in the area of rehabilitation. Acknowledging children as active participants. The current study suggests clinicians need to be aware of children living within the context of parental TBI, recognizing their position within the home as active members of the family system. Rolland, 1999, vulnerable to the impact of parental TBI. Health practitioners working with families after TBI are uniquely positioned to identify children who may be struggling to cope with the changes they are experiencing as a result of parental injury. Children's accounts demonstrated how the well-being of family members within the shared, 102 interpersonal space of home are intimately connected, reliant on each other for support. Therefore, when working with the injured person, clinicians need to consider their client's well-being in relation to their family members, addressing the impact of injury on the usual roles, routines and rhythms of family life that existed prior to injury. TBI disrupts ways of being as a family, therefore health professionals have a role to play in supporting families to reconnect after injury as they find new ways of being together. A starting point to this process would be for health services to identify which of their clients are performing parenting roles and consider what support parents need to cope with the demands of parenting after TBI. As part of this process, clinicians would be well placed to explore what support children may need to cope with the changes resulting from parental injury, as well as how they may be better supported in their contributions to family recovery. Acknowledging the various ways in which children seek to support their parents and mediate the stressors in family life reveals ways in which the rehabilitation process as a whole could be bolstered. Similar recommendations have been made within studies exploring parental experiences after TBI, which emphasize how rehabilitation practice has the potential to harness support for the patient by looking at the roles family members, including children, play within the patient's life, e.g. Edwards et al. 2014. Children's accounts demonstrated one area of change that they struggled with most after parental injury related to their parents' personality changes and issues with anger management. Only 2 families in the current study had received access to professional support for their children after parental TBI, and in both cases there was a sense that these services had been disappointing, having failed to deliver what was meaningful to the child. Children highlighted that having professionals who would listen to them rather than simply try to tell them what to do was important, indicating the importance of engagement within the therapeutic relationship. Dara, Sample, and Krieger, 2001. Their accounts underscored that it is the experience of parental injury as lived that matters most. They wanted information that could be tailored to their specific needs, working with them to find practical solutions as to how they could act in response to their parents' changes rather than offering generic information about TBI or focusing on the needs of the 103 injured parent. Children's accounts emphasized that talking to people about their experiences is not straightforward, whether it be friends or professionals, highlighting the process relies on trust, a level of understanding and having people who are prepared to listen. Some children suggested that they felt it may have been helpful to have had the opportunity to talk with other children going through similar experiences rather than professionals. The need for greater acknowledgement of children within the home after parental TBI extends beyond the role of the clinician and includes those who direct design of research and policy. Research and policy needs to recognize children as active members of society, who not only deserve to be the subject of research, but can also actively contribute their understandings as participants. The current study has demonstrated that hearing from children can offer new insights into experience, not only of personal experiences of parental TBI, but ideas that relate to the family experience as a whole. The findings have shown that children, given opportunity to talk directly about their lived experiences, can demonstrate their competencies as active participants within research. Adults who are positioned within the lives of children, through choice or circumstance, not only have a role to protect them but also to acknowledge their rights and support needs. Children are impacted by decision-making that concerns the adults in their lives, and should be given opportunity to have input into decisions that affect their lives. Lansdowne, 2001, Ministry of Social Development. 2002. Developing Adult